the case, but you're saying to me you're trilingual, which is
more
astonishing.
More Scots speak foreign languages than people in other parts of Britain.
Is that a fact?
It is
Why
a fact.
is that?
Because we're more externally focused.
Actually, yeah, I think that makes sense. That makes sense. Maybe as a smaller nation mindset as well. It's like, you know, big neighbor at the big neighbor on the south. It's less, you know, yeah. You need to reach out to traditional allies like the French, for instance.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. As we kick off, you might as well explain yourself, Adam. Like, why are you wearing the tricolor? Where are you exactly right now?
Well, I'm in France, but actually, I'm wearing this tricolor because I bought some tickets for the Olympics in Paris next year, and they emailed me like, buy this merch, you know, and I fell for the marketing and just bought loads of stuff.
So this is the official gear for next year. Is what you're wearing now? Is it?
It's like a training top for the. Yes.
Cool.
I absolutely love France. I love it so much, and I have done for 46 years.
Yeah, that's great. I need to see more of France. I have to say, I'm one of these that literally Paris and that's it, and then Paris back, and you know, it's all like work wise, right? But you never go to another part of the country, so I definitely need to do that. I do. It's the same thing with Germany. It's always Berlin, but this time I'm going to Berlin. I'm also taking 3 days in Hamburg as well, because I thought I cannot be just spending time in Berlin all the time. I love the city, but I can't just stay there, you know. Anyway, we're live, everybody. Welcome to Brainfood Live on Air. It is episode 212. We're bringing it to you every Friday. We're back at HQ, and I'm really excited to be chatting with you today because this has been on my mind for longer than you might imagine. And I think it's one of those like macro issues that we in recruitment probably feel sort of the impact of, but we're not really talking about it enough. Maybe because we're just at the front end of it. But with the COVID, the candidate shortage, the persistent labor shortage issues, even when we are apparently in a recession, and even when, you know, loads of people are being laid off, there's still workers we can't hire. We can't hire nurses, can't hire teachers, can't hire construction people. Ireland can't hire anybody that knows how to mix concrete. Tradespeople, all of this. We're missing people. Why is that? Is it possible that we are actually missing the absolute numbers of human beings? In other words, the population that does this type of work, bear in mind, usually physical work that you need to be physically fit to do, have we actually got too old as a society and we're not able to actually grow enough people to do those jobs? Hence why we try to import them, and then we create all kinds of political issues and cultural conflict with immigration. So demographic crisis, that's the topic of today's conversation. What is the impact? What is the impact of how does this help us think about immigration? What does it mean going forward? What does it mean in the AI-enabled world? That is the topic of today's chat. All right, let's do some sound checks. First of all, folks, for everyone who is watching this on Crowdcast, this is the safest place to watch Brainfood Live, by the way. Always going to be here rather than anywhere else. Can you hear me okay? If so, let me know in the chat. We should be live streaming this all over the place. There has been a bug on LinkedIn, I'm afraid to say, which has prevented go live on time for the last 2 episodes, I've noticed. So we've basically gone live streaming in different places 10 minutes after the fact, which is super, super annoying. But I can see myself on LinkedIn, all right? So I think we've actually fired off okay. If you can watch this on LinkedIn or any other LinkedIn, there's loads of people also live streaming this, including Juliana Park, including Rob Walker, including Claire Mohammed. If you're watching it on their profiles, let me know in the comments on the LinkedIn thread there, and then we should be able to kind of understand where we're at. I think people can hear us okay on a Crowdcast, which is great, and I can see us going live here. Okay, let's talk about. Well, before we get into it, let's thank our sponsors. As ever, folks, we need to thank our sponsors for the show. Every single week, a company comes up and says, "You know what, Hong, we're going to help you keep this conversation on the road." And today, it is none other than Candidate, one of the big sponsors of Brainfood this year, one of the coolest embedded recruiting companies that we've seen come out of the UK over the last several years. They are sponsoring today's show, and CEO Alex Van Claveren is actually on waiting on the wings, fully swagged up to tell us all about it. Let's see whether we can bring Alex on screen and hear from him. He's another person that has decided to exit to warmer climes, by the way. He is in, I believe he's in Lisbon right now. So it's like flight from British Isles. There he is.
Hey, how's it going?
Brexit effect.
How you doing, Alex? Nice to see
good,
you.
Thanks. I'm actually in London.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Why didn't you say we should catch? Maybe you didn't want to see me, mate. I get it.
Literally came back yesterday. I just got back. Nice to see you, Adam.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, all good?
Very good.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice.
Well, before we get on, Alex, if you're hanging around next couple of days, whatever you got time, let me know. Obviously, it'd be good to go for a beer or a coffee or something. But yeah, no, firstly, where's the swag, mate? Here's an opportunity to get the brand out, and push it in people's faces in an obnoxious way. And there you are wearing a beige sweatshirt, mate.
Didn't even cross my mind.
Complete miss of opportunity. But Alex, tell us about a candidate. Who are you? What it is you do? Why should people care about it?
Yeah, so real quick. So I was practicing how to do like a live ad in an entertaining way. And there's a podcast which is called Smartless. I don't know if you come across it, and they do a really good job. So I've been practicing from them. So 60 seconds, real quick, I'm going to give it to you. So I'm Alex, CEO at Candidate. Thank you, Hung, for having me. At Candidate, we partner with talent teams at fast-growing companies to help them hire. Our sourcing team has been trained by some of the world's best sourcing coaches like Ala Pavlova and Vanessa Rath, two friends of the show, I believe. This is not just operating LinkedIn. This is advanced sourcing methods using multiple different platforms and techniques like Boolean search. We would like to offer everyone out there, we will do a 100% free trial to work with one of our world-class sources. What does that mean? 20 superstar candidates added to your talent pipeline. We will work on any role, no matter how challenging. I'll probably regret that. But we are particularly effective at the engineering and senior hires. We have done 150 of these trials in the last 12 months, and an astounding 57% has resulted, I'll say that again, has resulted in a direct hire. No charges if you hire, no hidden fees at all. It's 100% free trial. Thank you so much, Hung. Nice to see you, Adam. Over to you.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. 57 free placements you've made. Let's make this clear. So essentially, anybody listening to this can claim a free trial from Candidate to help you boost your pipeline. Think of a job right now you're struggling to fill, any job. They're going to put 20 candidates into that pipeline because they're going to dedicate a resourcer to basically help you fill that job. That sounds like an incredible offer to me. Completely, like, there's hands-free, right? There's no obligation.
No strings attached.
Right. How people are saying they're in. How do they claim? How do you want these people to claim?
So I will put my email in the chat thing here. You just email me. Now, they do have to be proper companies. Like, it can't just be like, I'm kind of looking for something. So we will have a chat, but we've done 150 of these in the last 12 months.
Right, that's amazing. So I would say get in touch with Alex. Obviously, it's the email there. Connect with LinkedIn, obviously, and just let him know that you heard this offer on Brainfood Live. It's all over. We're broadcasting this all over the place, by the way. So if you want to just drop your LinkedIn into a comment thread somewhere, somebody will pick that up somewhere, and we'll just get you involved in this process. Like I say, it's an incredible offer. There are jobs out there that are incredibly difficult to fill, or maybe you just haven't got the capacity sometimes to look at or give attention to jobs that are fillable. It's a free shot, 20 extra candidates. Go ahead and do it. Alex, thank you so much for your generosity, mate. This is the sort of offers we want to see from sponsors. We want to keep encouraging companies to do this to help recruiters hit their targets and do better this year. But yeah, listen, thank you so much, Alex. Enjoy the rest of the show. We'll catch up the next couple of days. I'll make sure we'll do that, mate.
Speak soon. Thanks a lot.
Take care, man. Cool. I love it. That's just mega generosity. And, I think that's such a doable thing. Yes, it includes the education sector, Liz. It could be teachers, it could be nurses, it could be exactly the people we're talking about, actually. So all of those people are totally relevant for this. I guess, get in touch with Alex K, it looks like, a candidate with a K. Sorry, it doesn't make sense.
Alex VK.
vk@candidate.com. The candidate is a capital K. Email them and say, look, I'm going to take your offer from Brainfood Live. No further qualifications. You don't need to ask whether this is real or not. Just claim it. And we'll be there. All right, cool. Adam, let's talk very quickly about the newsletter. Did you read it last week in your sunny spot in France whilst you're on a lake somewhere? Did you have the chance to peruse Brainfood? If so, what was interesting, mate?
I did, and I've got three. So the first one is the video which links the commercial property being like empty in major cities, with the fact that the banks are and investment companies are funding a lot of that, and it's losing money. And the link to media owning large shares in like banks and investment companies. It doesn't take much of a genius to fill in the dots there. I saw yesterday somebody posted online, in fact it was Joel Cheeseman posted online, that 5% of New York City has left New York City since 2020, and 7.5% of San Francisco has left San Francisco since 2020. It's not exactly a surprise, is it?
It's too expensive. I mean, 20 months ago, 20 months or so ago, the rents in places like San Francisco were just incredibly high. You couldn't get it even if you wanted to. Absolutely untenable. The reason why people needed wages of astronomical levels was to afford the basic living standards there. And obviously shift to remote. Why do you need to live in San Francisco? Just drop down to San Diego or something, or you could even stay in California and live a much better lifestyle working from remote rather than going in. And the same goes with New York. So yeah, there's a flight in the US to different states, and that's replicated everywhere. You see in London, for instance, HSBC let go of their iconic Canary Wharf tower, going to come down to a much smaller free desk type of spot. So they're already gone to the hybrid model. Man, if Canary Wharf collapses, that entire space, that's like billions of dollars of real estate. And what's really interesting is BlackRock, Vanguard, these investment managers, like they own half the banks. They also own all the real estate, and they also own half the media. So when you start hearing the return to office stuff, I call it the manufacture of consent to come back to the office, is because they're shoring up their portfolios. Crazy.
They're all interdependent, aren't they? Actually, all three that I'm going to talk about today are sort of macroeconomic type things, or they're real big picture things. So the second one is not quite about the same thing, but it's definitely linked. And that's the concept of the 4-day work week. So Hayes undertook a survey of 11,000 workers, and 93% said they thought it was a good idea. 89% felt like it would be beneficial to their health and well-being. 59% thought it would be good for their organization's productivity. 44% said they thought it would help with talent attraction. I'm surprised that wasn't 100% that thought it would help with talent attraction. But anyway, 92% of people doing it said it has made a positive impact on their home life. 84% said it's made a positive impact on their work. 53% of employers who are not doing it said they're not operationally ready for it. I mean, that literally means their payroll system isn't set up for it, and they haven't done.
You don't need to change the payroll. Just tell people not to come in. I mean, it's a BS argument. That I mean, the only circumstance where they can make the operational argument is if they're actually servicing customers they've actually got interface with customers on the day that they want to kind of reduce down. Well, you can moderate that by kind of having people make the choice as to which day it is, so that you've always got coverage.
Yeah, they do need to make payroll changes, because they've got to make changes to people's contracts, and everybody might be earning the same and they might be getting paid the same, but they do have to change the way everybody's contract needs to change, because it needs to be based on different days and different hours and things like that. And then things like insurances might have to change.
Mate, that's a single push update. You could just push that update to every contract and get everyone to commit to it. It's not technical.
What about people? Well, I've actually looked at it myself. And what about people who are already on a 4-day week, for example? What's the impact on them? And there are quite a lot of like real nuanced things that need to be looked at. But even still, it shouldn't be an impediment to doing it. But the bit that I thought was the most interesting was 34% of companies said they'd be more likely to do it if all 4 days were spent in the office.
Yep.
And 62% of employers said they would be happy to work in the office 4 days rather than 5 days hybrid. Now, this is like merging two different issues which aren't really related and shouldn't be related. A 4-day work week and the concept of where you work are different things. So it feels like a real control issue in here. Managers are very reluctant to relinquish control.
You can understand the clawback though. Like, let's say return to office. It doesn't, actually, you can force it. Basically, the employees want something back from it. And I get that as well. Let's say the return to office is a big clarion call. Are they going to start doing it? Massive resistance from people. And then you just dangle whatever compromise you can and say, look, listen, we're going to shift to 4-day week, keep your salary as is, but you've got to come in. I think it's a decent deal. And I think a lot of people would take that.
But the suggestion there is that there's an acknowledgement that working in the office is better. And I don't know if we're at that point yet. Have we got some agreement on that yet?
No, but I think the employers think it is. So employers, I'm talking about the people that own the business and the people that
Goldman Sachs.
that do indeed invest in other businesses, right? So if you look at the investment management side, they invest so much in all other types of businesses that they would understand that this is the right thing. This is definitely, like, you can go Marxist on this. This is a proletariat versus bourgeoisie conflict. But I think the conflict will eventually resolve itself into 4-day in office, and basically the proletariat will accept that. It could be where we're at. By the way, Maury, totally right on the rents. Rents in London going up through the roof as well. It is actually a bit of a mystery because it's definitely the case that populations has declined, so it should mean rents go down. It hasn't happened. Why? Theory is that landlords are hoarding it, or they're leaving the landlord market and taking the stock away. So there's all kinds of different reasons why the rent inflation is insane, even though you're welcome, Michael. Make sure you bookmark that, by the way. And basically there's a discrepancy between rental and retail, how much you would pay. Anyway, 4-day working week. Yeah, it's worth checking out that Hayes thing in case you want to argue internally. Go and share that around. Okay, one more, mate.
Yeah, last one was, as always, McKinsey's brilliant work around the impact of different things and what it's going to do for different types of jobs. So they looked at the impact of generative AI on 16 different business functions, and they set out a sort of scatter graph, or I don't know if that's the technical term for it, but something like that, around like which of these functions are going to spend a lot of their budgets on it, and what is the impact going to be. Now, what this tells me is, what are the jobs to encourage my kids to go and aspire to do in the future, right? So sales are forecast to spend only 5% of their budgets on generative AI, but the impact's going to be more than 75% of annual productivity and contribution. So, I mean, that's just huge. It's very huge. Marketing, again, only 10% of their budget, but again, a huge uplift in product. Customer operations, much larger percent of their budget on it, 40%, but big uplift in value. Engineering, again, 30% or something, big uplift in value. But things like corporate IT, strategy, legal, pricing, there was 4 or 5 where low spend on this area, and McKinsey are predicting low impact as well. So go and work in corporate IT, strategy, legal, pricing. I don't know where talent acquisition fits into that. I don't think it was on the list.
It was. McKinsey were very bullish on talent acquisition, and indeed all of HR, because they're saying it's high EQ work and they should be secure against secure against AI disintermediation, so to speak. But yeah, I've got my question marks on all of that. Even though it's optimistic. So what I've just shared in the link, go ahead and read that. Really important. By the way, McKinsey's worth reading, not because you just take it as gospel, but guess what? Your boss is going to read that. So even if you don't swallow it hook, line, and sinker, you got to know what the executive level are thinking about. There's going to be a McKinsey worm in that person's ear. So you need to know at least the kind of information your CEO is consuming so that you can understand what's going on. And like Adam mentioned, you got kids, you got to kind of guide kids to the future that's going to be at least viable. And that is true for yourself also, in the sense that, you know, you still got a career going forward. None of us are looking at retirement anytime soon. It's another topic we need to touch upon when we talk about demographic crisis. How do we support people that are becoming increasingly infirm and unable to sustain themselves? Okay, great. We've got to also think about this, but make sure you're positioning in such a way that there's going to be future, like, robust need for what you can offer. No point in doubling down on stuff that basically people would prefer a robot to do or some software to do.
Sorry, I see that. I see you're right. They've got talent and organization is what they call it, which includes HR, and they've got 5% of annual spend on this. I think they've got that wrong. I think it's going to be a much higher percentage of annual spend is going to go into this.
I think they're totally wrong on that. I think one thing the mistake about this, I have sympathy with the EQ argument, but the reality is companies should get smaller as a result of AI. So the complexity of a company will go down, the social complexity will go down, therefore all of the HR stuff will go down. If you look at sort of the requirement for HR expands exponentially with the complexity of the business. Because there's lots more connections, lots more information. Employee relations becomes a thing. You know, D&I becomes a bigger thing. Everything becomes a bigger thing once you have a larger, more complex social organization. You crunch it down to 10-person business. Do you need a HR person? You just need decent managers. Basically, TA and HR, I think, the danger for us isn't so much, AI is going to directly disintermediate what we do. It's just going to make companies smaller, which basically means that the overall requirement for our support functions will probably decrease. In which case, again, we need to be agile, career agile, and think about how the hell we position ourselves on that. Anyway, let's get on with it. Let's get some of our wonderful guests on and talk about the demographic crisis here. We do have Kevin Wheeler. Everyone knows him. Let's get him on. We're going to get everyone on, by the way. There's no point in delaying it any further. Let's get Letitia on as well. I see Mariano chatting away also, so we'll make sure Mariano is here as well. Boom. Right.
Just while we're bringing people on here, John said get your kids into legal via apprenticeships. I don't think law firms do apprenticeships. You have to go to university and qualify as a lawyer to go into a traineeship, I think. But the other thing is, I feel like McKinsey might have got that wrong as well. Legal jobs, there's so much repetitive stuff in a lawyer job. Unless you're a partner, everything else is so repetitive.
Yeah, law is not a good place to operate in. I don't think
it is. It's going to get obliterated.
Yeah, it should get obliterated. To be fair, okay. Let's say hi to our guest, Letitia. Wonderful to see you on the show. By the way, I've been a big fan of Letitia for a long time. Everyone should subscribe to her newsletter. It's absolutely fantastic. But Letitia, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do? Tell the audience real quick.
Thanks, Hung. I'm so happy to be here with you, and thanks for the invitation. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time too. So I write about the future of work. I've been doing this for about 8 years. I write for a French media company called Welcome to the Jungle. And I'm French, but I live in Germany. So vive la France, Adam. You're right. I'm being more French as I have lived abroad for 10 years. And I write about the future of work with a feminist perspective. So with this blind spot that a lot of prospectivists have, that they don't look at, the gender issue or pink collar jobs. It's mostly about, automating white collar tasks rather than, changing diapers and cleaning toilets, which AI cannot yet do, or it's too expensive to have machines do those things.
Yeah, fantastic. Everyone should just follow Letitia. I've just sent her LinkedIn on there. Really, really powerful thinker on the future of work. We have, of course, Kevin Wheeler. Kevin, great to see you as well. I don't think anybody doesn't know who you are, but can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure. I run the Future of Talent Institute. We've been trying to track and write about and speak about the trends in talent acquisition and HR for the last 20 years or so, and spend a lot of time just looking at what's going on and where's it going to take us.
Amazing. Also, Future of Talent, Future of Work, I think it's called. The newsletter is amazing. Also, another newsletter you need to subscribe to. So feel free to link your newsletters into the chat stream there. And finally, we have Mariano Mamatino. Mariano, congratulations, you have a new job. So firstly, well done on that. And secondly, quickly introduce yourself. Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, no, thanks, Hang. So I'm Mariano. I'm a labor economist. More recently, I joined the Burning Glass Institute, which is not to be mixed up with the Burning Glass Technologies. The Institute is a think tank that was founded about a couple of years ago. So it's kind of like up and coming, like a new nonprofit. I joined there where I do research on labor markets and education as well. Before that, last 10 years, I was mostly working at tech companies. So Indeed and LinkedIn, more recently Amazon. And before that, I was a researcher like in academia and international organization, but always looking at labor markets, future work, immigration, and demographics and other topics really close to my heart. So it's great to be here and to be on this show again.
Let's get into it. I mean, basically, Adam, you and me are obviously the least intelligent people here, so we'll do the minimum of chat. Let's throw it into. Actually, no, we'll keep asking the dumb questions as represent the audience. That's our job. Okay, let's ask you, Kevin. Can you define what we mean about the demographic crisis? It's kind of a term that's now bleeding into the mainstream. You start seeing it into newspapers, probably for the first time, in the broadcast media over the last 12 months or so. Can you give us a definition of what the crisis is? What is demographic crisis?
Basically, really simply, it's we're getting older and we're having fewer children. That's the bottom line. And if you look at the birth rates in all of the developed world, which includes China, all of Europe, the United States, and selective other countries, we're having less than a replacement birth rate. So basically, it requires statistically 2.1 children per woman to replace the current population. And Europe is as low as 1.1 to as high as 1.9, but it's really a significant issue. And China is about 1.1. Japan is like the same. So basically, more people are dying than are being born, and that's a huge problem. And at the same time, those of us who are alive are getting older every year. So you've got older population with fewer young people to backfill.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty succinct sort of description. And actually, I remember now you mentioned Japan. Wasn't it like 2 or 3 years or so ago where there was a really interesting retail stat, which was a shocking kind of revelation. But apparently, the purchase of adult diapers exceeded that of diapers for kids, and that was like a big sign to say, wow, what's going on here? Essentially, the population has aged so much, and obviously people in Japan live longer. There's another factor of aging, like our longevity has increased, but because of that, the amount of time that we spent needing to be supported, because we might be infirm, we get to a point where actually we're not able to work, or we maybe we shouldn't be working. I mean, I don't want my mum to be working when she's 78 or whatever. She should be retired. So we're getting to the point where basically there's too many old people, not enough young people. The pipeline in recruiting, we love talking about pipeline, but the pipeline of young talent isn't there. And we basically fill it with immigration, right? That's essentially what has been the solution, quote unquote, over the last, 20, 30 years or so. We've brought people in to fill in the gaps. So Mariano, let's, I wonder whether, actually, no, I will not drop you into it, Mariano, but there's another term I want to talk about, which was, I want us to define for the audience, which was, what is it? The dependency ratio. Is that something you're familiar with anybody here? Like the concept of how many people in society are working and therefore sort of tax paying, therefore supporting the society, and how many people that aren't working and actually have dependents and need support. And there's a ratio that tells you, okay, that number's okay because there's enough people supporting the social system. But the dependency ratio can actually get skewed with this demographics, and eventually we have too many dependents and not enough supporters, which means more work, less time off, more pressure and stuff like this. So has anyone heard of this term, or is this something I've just fished out of my, wrong side?
I've definitely heard of it, but I think the offset to that is corporate profits and how much they contribute to the overall economy. So if you have fewer people working and companies are making more and more money, then theoretically you could tax those companies higher and redistribute that income to these people that aren't working. So that's kind of the concept now. Changing the tax structure is not politically very easy to do. So that's the real challenge. But using the dependency ratio as the only method assumes that all of us working are paying for everybody else, and that's only partially true.
Yeah, so you're basically saying the ways in which we pay for social services is through personal tax of workers, but also corporate tax, of course. And that needs to be piped into the right places. So, by the way, taxation isn't the only thing that's required. You've also got to figure out where you spend the tax money. There's no point just taxing everybody and then deciding to spend it on irrelevant stuff or on catastrophic sort of initiatives that burn cash. Mariano, as a person that's kind of focusing on the economic side of it, is this something that you study in your work? And what contribution does the demographic crisis make to what we recruiters have been feeling, because we call it the candidate shortage at our end? We can't find the workers, right? So are those two things linked, or is there another way to think about this, in your opinion?
No, absolutely. They're 100% linked. I also just wanted to quickly comment on something, on the pension. I think like the pension system was built like in a society where you had like a dependency ratio that was, kind of like stable over time. So you had like enough like younger people working for, like a fewer share of people retiring. And that's something we're probably going to have to change, right? So even this like 0-1 like type retirement where like you're not working anymore might not maybe be something that in the future we'll keep working as that dependency ratio becomes different. But demographics have everything to do with like labor markets. It's that determine like ultimately like the size of the labor force, and that's obviously like very important. So I think what we're observing like today, it's a couple of different things. So obviously what Kevin was saying, like the big picture is that fertility rates are like lower, but also fertility rates are like decreasing faster than we would have thought just a few years ago. I can give you like one number from Brazil, which is like a stat from this week. So Brazil has 10 million less people than demographers would have expected just a year ago. So the census ran, they got the results in. Brazil is missing like 10 million like people. And Brazil is obviously like a middle income country, right? And we think as economists, like demographers think about this is like the demographic transition of countries. It seems that, like middle and sometimes even lower income countries today are already like transitioning at a rate that is faster. So what does this mean for recruiters? Well, there are some jobs that are already hard to fill, right? And that has more to do with things like skill mismatch, the fact that not enough people maybe study like STEM degrees or, like maybe kind of like technical skilled trades like professions. And those are, obviously they're going to be affected by the demographic like crunch, but they're already like hard to fill roles. I think what the demographic crunch is going to bring is actually these shortages are going to become more widespread. So perhaps like even roles that in the past might have been, like easier to fill in a way. So jobs that didn't require like maybe some really advanced education, then we might start to feel, that even those roles are going to be harder to fill. And this is, I think we're already seeing some of that, like coming out of the pandemic. The labor markets have been pretty like resilient. We have like record levels of occupation, of like employment. And so and unemployment hasn't really increased much. I think to some extent, like demographics are already contributing to that, especially in Europe, where you have like countries like Germany, for example, like Italy, where labor force have been shrinking for a while. So yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to have to adjust probably to like a new normal where shortages are going to be more widespread.
So one solution is pensions, isn't it, Letitia? Let's bring you in as the French representative, very famously, and obviously there's like seemingly another sort of big surge of public protest recently in France, unrelated, I believe, to the pension increase. But there was an increase in pension age that triggered a huge response from people who obviously had maybe planned for, hey, retirement at this point, and suddenly they have to work extra years. In the UK, there's no question that's going to happen as well. Even a bigger hike going forward. Do you reckon that this is one of the solutions to this kind of dependency ratio, simply get people working longer? I mean, is that, I mean, leaving aside the ethics of it, do you think that's a legitimate way to try and temporarily like stave off this problem? If you were a policymaker, what are your thoughts on raising pension ages overall?
In theory, it's always a good idea to think that way, but not without thinking about what work entails, how exhausting it is, how it's organized, how it's compatible, ergonomically speaking, with aging and an aging population. And those were questions that were on the table during the debates about the pension reform in France. And there have been so many misconceptions about that reform. Number one, the French are not lazy. It has nothing to do with laziness. They had a pretty good system which they wanted to keep. Number two, people think that the pension age was raised from 62 to 64. That's not exactly correct. The thing is, you have to wait until 64 to get a full pension, provided you have you have all your contributions. So many people already work up until 67 or 68 to have a full pension. Mostly women who have had career interruptions. They never have all the contributions, so they never have a full pension, which is why you have a 40% gender gap when it comes to pensions in France. It's even higher in Germany or other countries. And so there are a lot of underlying questions that are more subtle than just raising pension age, which on paper seems pretty easy and undebatable, but it's actually more complex.
Yeah, so it's a crude measure. Obviously, I think the governments are incapable of anything but crudity, by the way. And this is not a criticism of governments, but I think they just have blunt tools. Like they just don't have the implementation capacity to do anything with any nuance. So big blunt tool, let's raise the age, let's see what happens. And there's going to be massive social strife. And there's going to, as you mentioned, many people that are not going to, it's going to be really, really difficult for certain types of people. And as always, it's the most vulnerable people that will be impacted the most. I didn't even know that situation with the gender gap either, Letitia. So thank you for educating me on this. I've been, for some reason, like a very early critic of pensions in general. Like I've just ignored it. I just never believe it was something I would ever get. So I don't know anything about it. I'm totally clueless. But yeah, now that we kind of figure out there's a lot of people that actually are dependent on it, and they see it as a signpost to say we've got there, and now the post is moving. That's got to be really, really difficult. Okay, another way to solve it is immigration. Right, we've seen only this week some really interesting and aggressive moves by Canada. I don't know whether you guys saw that. Canada are basically saying, hey, if you're in the US with a H-1B, you can come over here. And it's like, I love that. It's like literally saying, right, US, you've already done the assessment. We're just going to take the people. I thought, right, that's brilliant, aggressive move. But that's like someone who's being, Canada's being super, super aggressive, and I mean that in a non-negative way, but in a way to understand they need an injection of people. We've seen Poland be very, very the change and loosen their immigration policies at a very surprising rate, because we previously might have anticipated Poland being quite hostile to immigration. Suddenly they're saying, you know what, come on in. Germany, I think only last week have said, you know what, we need these tradespeople and they need to come in. Are we starting to change the attitude to immigration and trying to shift the story for it being a positive thing to a negative thing? And what do we think of this as a solution to the dependency ratio and maybe even demographic crisis? They're younger people going to come in, right? So is that one way to solve this? Open up to everyone.
Well, I will just throw in my thoughts. I think immigration in the short term is going to be incredibly important for many companies to bridge the gaps. But the real challenge is the quality of the immigrants and their educational levels, and that's the real challenge. And AI is unfortunately going to have a disproportionate impact on the bottom end of the workforce. This is what all the research points to. So companies like Amazon that might hire a lot of immigrants to go in the warehouse and package all the stuff that you order, that's going to be roboticized very quickly. So that's typically where a lot of the immigrants we get in the U.S. come from South America or Africa or Mexico. They're usually lower skilled employees who work in those kind of jobs, and those jobs are rapidly going to become roboticized. So if you can say immigration of highly educated, people, that's wonderful and great and should definitely be encouraged, which is what the H-1B visa in the U.S. tries to do. But that's not the major group of people who are immigrating, who want to immigrate. So you got a real challenge here about who wants to immigrate versus what does a company want to receive for people, right? So these become real challenges for companies, countries, and their immigration policies, right? But the bottom line is, for Europe in particular, if you don't encourage immigration, it's going to be a real crisis, I think, for most countries in Asia and Europe.
Do you know what? I'm going to disagree with this. I reckon, look, if the issue is actually demographic crisis, we just need the youth infusion. All right, we just need younger people in. And if it doesn't matter about your education, literally, if you're a human being that is able to reproduce, get in the country. If you want to be completely crude about it, because even if you can't predict how this person is going to turn out, right? Like you can say, right, this person currently is coming in at this level. Wasn't Steve Jobs, his parent was like a Syrian refugee or something? Like his parent would have been screened out if we were too harsh at the filtration level at the entry point. We just need to get the people in so that, put them into the system, give them a way to integrate, and they can fly forward. And yes, some of them are going to not go in the right direction and whatnot, but that's just simply the way it is. Vanessa, you're quite right. There's a reverse impact of this, which is countries being denuded of people. And South Africa is a very good example, huge brain drain. And also even within Europe, we see this. Brazil. So Brazil is actually one of those that has lost a lot of talent from South America to Europe and also now US. But all of the Southern European countries, Greece, Bulgaria, all of those countries, Italy, lost a lot of talent to Northern Europe. That was basically the Northern European early attempt to do freedom of movement immigration. That's not been sufficient, and now they need to do non-EU immigration. Is it just almost like robbing Peter to pay Paul a little bit here, and we're kind of just stealing? It's almost like colonial extraction, right? We're going to these countries, just pulling these people out, and all right, forgetting about what's happening to those countries. Population crisis is exacerbated by losing the talent. Bulgaria, I think, is crashing down, not only through demographic crisis, but through immigration crisis. They're losing their people. So, okay, it's a selfish solution, immigration, I think, but there's a fundamental problem. Go on, Adam, you say something.
Can I? Yeah, I just want to ask about, aligned to that. As I understand, the global population is about 8 billion today, and it's the highest it's ever been. And it's projected to grow to about 10 billion in 2086. And then start to come down a little bit round about 2087. So where is all this? Where's the extra 2 billion from if we're don't have enough people in all these Western countries?
With denuding them. I mean, basically, right now, the reason why people are interested in Africa, it's the curse of Africa for Africa is that it's always been perceived as a resource-rich place that other places exploit. Previously, it might have been minerals and resources. Now it's people. But at the same time, culturally, in Europe, we have a huge hostility towards African immigration. That's very, very evident when you see tragic sort of instances occur at a regular basis. So immigration seems like a temporary salve, even though it damages other countries. And also there's cultural problems with it because there's cultural resistance that manifests politically. and I think we've seen the rise of the right in all of European countries, and that's fueled by non-white immigration, if I can use those terms. What are your thoughts on this? Do we need to have the argument internally that immigration isn't the solution, or, and I'm careful here, and I realize I might be stepping into like delicate ground, or do we pay some attention to the right-wing perspective to say, look, that isn't the solution. We need to find a reason for people to actually do the work that seemingly native people are refusing to do. What are your thoughts on that?
Maybe if I can jump in quickly, like, so I think maybe we should maybe also change the mindset a bit. So I think like migration is not necessarily also like a, like 0-1 like thing again. So we have like things like, circular migration. So people like moving to a place, going back to their home countries. We've seen that, for example, Europe, where you have like a pretty interesting like social experiment of like free movement within the EU. You have actually quite a lot of that. So we've seen now with like Poland, for example, it was mentioned before, it's a country that's benefited quite a lot as the labor market got relatively stronger. In recent years, you've got a lot of people moving, for example, from the UK back to Poland. So, and this is just one example. And I think, as you get people more educated, and by the way, I think that's the solution for like to all the worst problem, like including, like talent shortages, which is like investing in education. So maybe there to be a case to be made also from, like richer countries or like higher income countries to think about that the problem on a global scale. So we have an opportunity with remote work as well to employ people without having them necessarily like move, physically to a different location. So, but yeah, I think education is gonna be key from that point of view. We're gonna have this like in the next like 40, 50 years, it's like massive kind of like young population in countries like Africa, even India to some extent. So I think, there's potential like mutual benefit. And also one thing that I want to say is that migration actually, especially for people who are educated, has a really high return for the person who's the migrant. So they might be able to earn like maybe 20 times, the lifetime income that they would have earned like if they stayed like in the country where they were born. So, well, even just economically, this is huge because of like, matching resources to the right like use, so efficient matching. But for the person, people themselves, obviously has like huge kind of like life implications as well. So obviously, this is it's a pretty complex like topic, but I think like maybe more global thinking about issues, and I think would probably be welcome. And I think it's also what I like is the fact that a few years ago there was a lot of like opposition to immigration. Let's think about Brexit. For example, it seems like now in a lot of countries the situation is actually reversed, right? So you have like Canada, you have like now the UK with the highest like ever inflows of like people from outside of the EU moving to the UK. You've got like Germany, who's thinking about like loosening the requirements for citizenship. So I think things are changing, and I think that's good news. So I think we should have more of that and more people moving and going back to their home countries. I think that's probably going to benefit everyone in the end.
It's politically still unpalatable, though, to have that argument. Like even in the UK. So in other words, yes, we've got like the highest rates. The inflows into the UK now are actually as high as they were during the freedom of movement period within Europe. But it's obviously now non-EU citizens. But no one's having the public debate on it, and no one's actually defending immigration. And in fact, conspicuously, the government is like signaling its anti-immigrant sort of bona fides in order to demonstrate, we're protecting British workers, etc. So hence the Rwanda thing, which is a disgraceful diversion of immigration and just dropping them off into this third country and paying Rwanda to deal with it. The creation of what is a prison hulk, if you do prison hulk, that's like Victorian era England getting a ship moored off coast and housing immigrants there. So politically, we're not able to deal with economic necessity, it seems. And I just wonder whether, that at some point there's a roadblock to immigration as a solution because of that reason. So let's talk about AI in a bit. But before we do that, folks, we always have to take a mini break in the middle of this conversation because Brainfood Live is a show that has to come off air. And it should never be a bottleneck to stop a conversation because the conversation must continue. We are a conversation starting show, folks. So if you're interested in continuing the debate about demographic crisis with all of our brilliant people on panel here and all of our brilliant commentators, by the way, take a moment to grab your LinkedIn URL and stick it in the chat stream and then connect to everyone else who has done the same. If you're watching this on any of the LinkedIns that are out there, please do the same. Take your LinkedIn URL, share it in the comment thread, and make sure you connect with everyone else there. That way, you walk away with a strengthened network of people that care about this topic. And if you ever want to revisit it, straight away, you've got people you can talk to right there.
Just a quick note for people that are watching this on LinkedIn. You don't need to put your URL in. You just say happy to connect.
No, you do. I think you should do that because
why would you do that on LinkedIn?
I don't know, man. Let's do it inception wise. Let's keep. Feels like something I should do.
Seems cool.
All right, people are doing it. Okay, so by the way, some brilliant comments in the thread. I don't know whether any of the panelists caught that, but people saying, "Hey, listen, it's not always a negative thing that people leave." Someone else validated your point about circular immigration, Mariano, which is very true. I think everyone on screen here is actually a multi-country person, right? We've all lived in different places and potentially would do the same. So all of those things I think are there. But I still don't think we're going to square the political circle here. I have yet to see any country explicitly say we're pro-immigration and for it to happen and stay within power. Everyone has to be anti-immigrant to get to political office, in which case we always have this sense where the native population feels like betrayed because they've been told, hey, no more people. And then at the same time, the government has surreptitiously brought people in order to support healthcare, in order to pick the fruit, in order to build the houses. So that kind of subterfuge, I think, is a big betrayal politically to the local people, and they're going to react and just keep voting further to the right. So that's my concern. I mean, Letitia, you're nodding your head on this.
I fully agree with you on this. So this anti-immigrant sentiment is so strong that everybody is contributing to it, but it will bring more tension in other ways. You mentioned people picking fruit and construction workers, but let's not forget the hundreds of thousands of social workers already missing in the UK alone. In France alone, it's nearly 400,000 workers missing, mostly female workers, to work in retirement homes, to work as domestic workers, to look after the elderly. All of those jobs are rising. In terms of labor shortages, this is in volume, in sheer volume, it's bigger than STEM-related shortages, even though STEM-related by far, millions for the EU alone. And how can AI help? It's pretty unclear. There are ways that generative AI can help produce, chatbots for the elderly and stuff like that. But it seems quite marginal compared to other fields where we can see very clearly how AI can help. Also, these jobs are so badly paid, which is why we rely on immigrants mostly, so badly paid that there is no incentive for automation. Machines are too expensive. Robotics is very expensive. Those are things that can make the jobs less physically taxing, because when you need to lift an elderly person, you literally break your back at age 45. And then you have this vicious circle of, the workload gets heavier because there are too few workers. And so they get more exhausted, they burn out, they leave, and you have fewer of them and no immigrants coming in. And it gets worse, and there are more tensions.
And by the way, the more stress you stress the existing workers now, the less kids they're going to have. Because if you're like totally exhausted with your 50, 60, 70-hour weeks and you're just about paying the rent with your low-paid job, guess what? You're not going to be thinking, let's have another kid. You're not going to do that. So we exacerbate the problem and create this doom loop where basically the people who are able to have kids are completely stressed by having to support too many dependents at a society level, and hence
you're right. And it's not just kids. It's not just kids, by the way, because if there is no infrastructure to look after children and the elderly, childcare, elderly care, you will not be able to work. This is exactly what happened in the US when between 4 and 5 million women, including accountants and lawyers, quit their jobs to look after their children because there was no childcare. So if there's no childcare for a different reason than COVID, there's no childcare because there are no immigrants to look after the children, no people, no workers, the same will happen. You will have fewer workers available on the market, mostly women, sometimes fathers too, who will just not be able to work either. So that's like a double contraction of the labor force.
And do you know what? It's not only the lack of availability of childcare, it's also the cost of it. I had a good friend of mine who, during the COVID period, basically couldn't go back to work because it economically made no sense for her to do that. She had 2 kids. Basically, you know, that in the US, childcare costs were just like so high. There was no way she could get a job that would actually justify it. So it would be completely self-indulgent for her to do so. And she hasn't done that. And of course, now she's out of the labor market. So Kevin, you're about to say something?
Yeah, I'm just going to a couple of comments. Just back to the immigration. Okay, remember the U.S. is probably the only country in the world that's completely built on immigration.
Correct.
So we're still very open to immigrants and immigration here. I think more than many other countries in the world, although there's certainly political and economic issues around that big time, especially coming in from South America and Mexico. But coming from Europe and other places, we're very positive. In Asia, you know, we have a huge Asian population here coming in. In terms of the childcare thing, it's very interesting. You know, look at Singapore. Singapore is a good example of a country with, you know, virtually a birth rate of 1 per woman, which is way, way below replacement. They've tried everything that you can think of to encourage people to have babies, including massive tax breaks and rebates and all sorts of stuff. But the one thing they haven't done is provide free childcare. And that's the number one issue, right? Exactly. And so when you ask a Singapore woman, why don't you have a baby? She said, because I can't afford childcare. And elderly parents that in Asia used to be your babysitters, they don't want to do that anymore. They've got their own life. They're healthy. Many of them are still working. So they're saying, my job is not to be your babysitter, even though I love my grandchildren. So it's a real challenge.
It is another thing as well. There's an economy of scale with bigger families as well. That we could apply that thinking to a large size family. So, for instance, if you had a family of 6 kids, those 6 kids will in turn basically together be able to much better look after the older parents as time goes on, because you're sharing it 6 ways. But you have 2 kids or 1 kid, the effort that one person then has to take care of their parents is so huge that it may prevent them from having their own kids because they don't have the time. So we're in a doom loop where having too small a family, which basically means we don't actually create the economies of scale to look after the elderly, which creates this social pressure. All of it just kind of feeds into this system that was just starting to tease out and understand a little bit more. Okay, guys, we're coming to the end of the show. We want to get to some solutions, some thoughts as to what to do about it. If 2 things I want to touch on. Firstly, does remote help with this? There has been some data to suggest that remote work actually produces more kids, because guess what? If the 2 parents or the people in the conjugal pair actually spend more time together, they end up having more kids. It's hardly a miracle. But apparently there has been a mini baby boom in cities where there has been a big remote sort of shift during the COVID period, because basically no commute. They're not in the office. They're actually spending time together. And because they're working from home, they've organized their ability to deliver from home. Suddenly, childcare becomes less of a problem because they can still deliver their work whilst they're actually still present with the child. So is remote work the way to try and solve this? Thoughts on this, anybody?
I think partially, maybe, really depending. I mean, you look at a good example for me is something, let's take the gaming industry or anything like that this largely can be done remotely. There's no reason they could not tap into the workforce in Kenya and Nigeria, which is young, which is really, more and more better and better educated. And, you know, if there was some way to encourage the students in those countries to study the things that we need, we could certainly set up remote work centers or, you know, use them as remote workers. So, but it's a more complicated thing. It requires some strategy and some planning on the part of companies that they want to actually tap into this workforce and use it. And it requires setting up, you know, payroll systems and all sorts of stuff that a lot of companies don't know how to do. But I think this is definitely remote work using, not necessarily having people in your country move somewhere else, but tapping into the people that already live in these countries and use their expertise and skill could be one of the ways. And many of the industries that don't require physical labor to help solve that problem.
The problem with that, though, is that from a government perspective, the tax revenue, where does that go? So I think right now that's a gray space, isn't it? Well, like if I'm a US company or a UK company, I put half my team into, I don't know, Tanzania. Like where am I paying my taxes? I don't know. Like probably Tanzania, I guess. So
it's no different, Hung, than having your factory in China and paying the workers in China. It's the same thing. We've been doing this for decades.
But what will happen in the government, though, because there's another aspect to the demographic crisis, is that there will be a shortfall of government tax revenue, because less people earning money, less people less people you can tax. Like you're gonna have to have a US style taxing system where you say if a US company does anything, any employee, irrespective of jurisdiction, is going to be paying something back to me. So we'll potentially see something of that type. Go ahead. Very quickly, Kevin.
Corporate taxes. Okay, and we keep going back to people paying the taxes, not corporations.
All right.
And I think we need to tax the corporations. They're making more money by using remote labor. Their tax rate should increase.
Yeah, so that's one of the solutions then, Kevin, is basically increasing corp tax to help support the social system. Okay, cool. We've lost Adam. That's fine. Letitia, go ahead.
Just remote work isn't the same as childcare. I mean, it helps for it. It's great for a number of reasons, but try working at home with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. It's just not possible. Look at what happened during COVID in the academic world. Mothers of young children submitted fewer research papers, and not because they were lazy, but just because they couldn't do both, which is why most remote workers long-term, when they have families, they live in cities. And they live in cities because they need this infrastructure of care to be able to work. So even if they work at home behind their computers, they will still need schools, hospitals, I mean, and you name it, all the institutions that support their work. So I don't think remote work in that way can replace those basic fundamental things that are childcare, healthcare, all infrastructures. This is the way to start if you want a better labor market.
So let's lean into the childcare. What do we do to scale up childcare? I mean, do we do the kibbutz style thing? You know, like try again, economy of scale. Very, very expensive right now. You got individual childcarers, etc. Right, just get the kids into a camp and just raise them all in one go. Is that something we need to try?
Why not? All kinds of ways are interesting to foster innovation and different ways of looking after those children. It's just also pay workers well, because those jobs will be more attractive. And if those workers are paid better, there is an incentive to be more innovative and use tech in a better way. So as long as they're badly paid, there's no incentive to use high tech and make those jobs better. So if you want to make them better, start by paying them a little bit more.
Yeah, there's no question. All of the jobs that are required. Sorry, Mariano, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to maybe quickly add something that you already have, for example, countries in Europe that actually have pretty good childcare. And those are countries that also have some of the highest female employment rate. And they actually have a higher fertility rate as well. So everything kind of goes together in this virtuous circle. These are countries that, well, we all know, mainly kind of Northern Europe, Scandinavia, Nordics, where obviously there is a lot of public spending into these kind of services. So it's a priority made by, the government sets aside money, a lot of money, as Letitia is saying, to pay for the services, to pay people who work in this industry good wages, so that they themselves can afford, having families, etc. I think remote is great. Its flexibility is, I think, it's always great. It gives people the flexibility to also stay home with their kids or to care for parents or someone else when they want to. But I also don't think it's a solution. It cannot be in place of the childcare,
right, cool.
care in general.
And build more housing. There was, a lot about Canada in the chat. It's the one bottleneck, right? Childcare and housing, just build more, because people will continue to move to cities rather than far away in the countryside.
There was a really good article, I forget what it was, I should share it, about why the Brits can't build houses. And you're absolutely right on this, Letitia. There was all kinds of once you create a system that ostensibly tries to protect certain local areas, suddenly that becomes very, very difficult to shift. And people can't. There's no incentive to go and build. Okay, we've got to talk about AI real quick, because AI is both a threat and a potential solution to the demographic crisis. Here's a theory, guys. I want to throw it out to you. I'm the only person that I know thinks like this, so I'm pretty certain it's a stupid idea. But I'm going to throw it out anyway. So AI, everyone talks about AI is going to improve productivity, right? Everyone agrees it does that, because hey, it's going to crunch this report down. It takes me 2 hours to read. Suddenly, I can get a summary in 2 minutes. Brilliant. That's efficiency. I'm going to say, we should say AI, we should reject productivity as an outcome of AI. We should say, you know what, my output level is going to stay exactly the same. Pre-AI and post-AI, output level exactly the same. What I want is my time back. And if I have my time back, then potentially I'll be able to spend more time with my wife. Maybe I'll spend more time with my family. Maybe I'll be able to visit my mom more, take care of my people. Why doesn't technology help us do that? And isn't that the true solution to the demographic crisis? Is that we need to separate the work side, stop throwing our entire souls into work, and say, okay, AI is doing the work. Apparently AI is doing all the work. Brilliant. AI can do it then. I want 20 hours of my week back so I can take care of my people. And that way we can reduce the requirement of the state to do it. What do you think of that?
Korea wants to increase the working time when faced with this, this demographic crisis. And you're right, Hong, the solution would be for them to work less, to release some of the pressure to solve some of the problems. So there's a reason why the 4-day work week is so popular, because we know it's possible. We know that with the productivity gains, we could, rather than be paid more or work more, just have more time. That's one way of sharing those productivity gains.
And actually, one way to resolve that corporate tax thing, don't need to do the corporate tax any higher. You can simply say, we're not going to give you more productivity. Simple as that, Mr. Boss. This AI is doing my job for me. That's it. I'm 10 hours a week for you, sir. What do you think, Mariano? Is this insane?
I mean, as an economist, I'm going to be a bit like maybe, hold back a little bit from like making too strong claims. I think you're right. Like, the bottom line is that, yes, I think we hope and we expect like like LLMs and, like a generative AI to have an impact on labor markets, like on productivity for sure. I think just we don't know exactly how long this is going to take, right? So past experiences of like different technologies, have shown that, there are like transition periods where, you might have like quite a bit of disruption. You might end up like perhaps like a decade or two later with, some impacts. I was reading on The Economist last night, like they talk about how AI might disperse like across firms. And in order to have like a truly, overall labor market impact, you actually need like small and micro enterprises to actually take up like AI tools. And that's not something that you can probably do, like in a month or two. So yeah, I think I would definitely welcome, working like a few hours as something that is kind of like fully accepted and maybe even like regulated by governments. But I'm not sure if it's going to be the way. I think past experience shows that, people will adjust. I think giving people choice is probably like would be the way to go also, so that different people might choose the amount of time they want to put in without necessarily like punishing or, like giving a premium to either one, right? So, and I think sometimes maybe into this labor market, you do have a premium for people who are like working like longer hours. But yeah, I think where perhaps like another interesting point that was mentioned is around, like also what's the potential of AI in solving, the bottlenecks that we mentioned. So for example, like the elderly care. So are we going to be able to perhaps like have fewer workers employed in that industry? I think as a kind of like goal, I think that's probably where we're going to see like a really big impact, because that's already like an industry and an area of like our labor market that is struggling quite a bit. But yeah, I think it's so we'll have to wait and see, really.
Yeah, the vision is: do we get the robots to do the work, or do we do the work of looking after our people? That is I just had this vision of our old age parents being taken care of by robots and automation. I'm thinking, okay, that's one way, but maybe a human being.
Yeah, I think Japan is like they're experimenting some stuff. Like,
yeah.
So there's it's definitely possible.
Japan is doing that now. They've got robots that actually pick up people when they fall down, and they're your companion. They give you your medication on time. They remind you to do things. The robotic world will have some impact, but I don't know that it's really going to ever replace human care for elderly people. It may help it. I think the real impact of AI is going to be more at the bottom end of the workforce. I think that's where we're already seeing it. I think you're going to see robots, which are already just exponentially growing, the use of robots, and I think we don't even realize it. But the auto industry is reduced the number of employees by millions by using robots. Tesla is highly roboticized, and they're getting even more and more roboticized. So Amazon has just invested millions more in robots for their warehouse. So within a couple of years, they will be worth probably almost nobody in an Amazon warehouse. So, I mean, the bottom end of the workforce is going to be really impacted by AI more than the professionals. Will be augmented by it. Whether it increases productivity or not, the jury's out. But we'll see where that goes.
Do you know what? You've just set us up for the next conversation, Kevin. Like, what does the world look like when we are fully automated? Is this the end of capitalism? Because guess what? Like, you're going to pay a robot a wage. Are you going to program the robot to go and spend stuff on the Friday night? No. Like, if the wage economy disappears as a result of over robotization, it's the end of consumerism. It's the end of economic growth. We're going to basically remember Ford, when he first created his factory, he made sure that he was paying the workers enough that they could buy the damn car. Now, do we have the same attitude when we're thinking about automation, or we are kind of at a company level, we're not thinking wide enough. We're just thinking, we can get more competitive than the next company, which ultimately means less and less human workers and less consumerism overall. Kevin, hold the thought. Letitia, Mariano will bring us back for that conversation. I think that's what to talk about. But we are at the end of today, folks. So thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope you've enjoyed this kind of a little bit of a segue away from our normal topic. But I think it is important for us to kind of open the conversation into these major trends that percolate down to our operating work at recruiting. Because when you're wondering about the candidate crisis, is it actually the fact we have a people crisis? We literally don't have the people to do the work. It's not about getting better at sourcing. It's about understanding the deeper societal reasons as to why the people aren't there to do the work in the first place. So folks, if you've enjoyed this show, make sure you follow the channel. We do this every week. Next week, I totally forget. Oh yeah, next week we're going to talk about overcoming the imposter syndrome. So folks, if you are an imposter, and I think you are, you want to sign up to the show and make sure we talk about it. How do we get over how do we get over this other crisis that we have? So let me say thanks to our guests. It's been brilliant. Letitia, great to see you. Wonderful to have you on the show. We'll definitely get you back if you're for it. Kevin Wheeler, wonderful to see you as well. Of course, you're going to be coming back at some point. And Mariano, congratulations on a new job. We'll get you back to the show as well. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank
Thanks.
Cool. That was a great show, wasn't it? I really enjoyed that. We should do more of these deeper, philosophical chats, I think. I kind of enjoy them, even though at a practical level, what the heck are we going to do as recruiters, right? We don't know. But at least we have some sort of idea as to why that is. Anyway, remember, folks, we have to battle for our time back. There's no reason why AI should not take on our work. We should not be fearful of AI taking over the work. We just need to fight for the idea that we need to reduce our labor and maintain our jobs. That's the next big argument for us going forward. Anyway, we're out next week. We'll be at, actually, it's going to be RecFest aftermath. So if you're at RecFest next week, I'll see you there. Otherwise, I'll see you next Friday. Thanks for watching, everybody.